Um, I'm going to be reading from a collection this morning of really, really tiny little poems, really short ones. And so if you've ever been to an open mic night, you may not know what to do with this. They'll go by so quickly. So I'm asking you to bear with me. The title of the collection is Less is More, More or Less. And I want to start with a quote from one of my favorite poets, William Stafford, who we're celebrating what would have been his 100th birthday. Past poet laureate, and I've recently become friends with his daughter, and I wanted to honor him on this 100th year. He says that you don't need many words if you already know what you're talking about. I was very careful not to look at anyone. So the title of the book, Less is More, More or Less, and the first poem in the book is Less Than Less. More is filled with extras and aches to have them all, since having the most is the reason for the game, which in the stretch becomes problematic because of the inevitable way that moreness negates the possibility of enoughness and therefore creates a certain neverness that kills all joy. Condolence. I turned 48 this day, so 49 in 365 more. And yes, you know you're starting to look at when the birthday jokes of your better friends sound softer this year. Maybe one of them lets a heady hitter slip while averting his gaze to the whole grain cake with only a few candles because of the fire code. But mostly, though, they are all just so sorry that this is happening to you. And by the way, these poems are from a chapter that the title of the chapter is But Enough About Me. And the chapter has its own quote from a favorite poet of mine, Tony Hoagland, and a line from one of his poems. I think narcissism is the system that means the most to me. This is The Question. I remember it well, and the way it loomed as some dark guarantee over the lowered brow of every father of every girl I ever dated. Well, yeah, but what do you really do? Here's one for my wife, whose dad did not let me down. She is, in the end, my better 3/4. Let's face it, I bring at most a fourth of anything worth putting under a microscope to this budding matrimony. And if you're thinking, really? I'd say a 16th at best. I won't fight you on it. Diamond apology. It is the day before our 2nd anniversary, and I owe my wife an apology. And I don't mean one of those knockoff under-the-counter at Walmart or even Dillard's piece of crap zirconium things. I mean something with a real shine of humility to it. The cut of an almost crystalline sincerity that proves my wholehearted, and I'd go as far as to say absolutely igneous sorriness. These poems that I'm about to read here are from the 2nd chapter, a chapter titled A Parliament of Owls. These are coffee shop and bar poems, and it begins with a quote from Tom Waits. Well, go ahead and call the cops. You don't meet nice girls in coffee shops. Chameleonic. She is a rainbow of self-preservation. Every tint and shade, a postcard home, with little notes and faded stamps marking the margins of all she has survived. hippies. The real ones have lower back pain now, and ponytails hanging by only a few gray threads. They've had to switch to the Velcro sandals lately because of rheumatoid arthritis. And though they remember some of the main principles of the 60s revolution, they've stopped for coffee on the side streets in Taos and seem to be having a hell of a time getting up from their seats. Here is an indirect poem for Carla and Joel here. It's called Request. To every musician, the request will come. If not tonight, then next week or here. And it will arrive from the back row, sometimes the front, or maybe slip in at your feet, handwritten in black Sharpie on a white cocktail napkin, as it did to me last night. Play Freebird. This one is I alone together, a small case I with a capital L. I alone together. The other night, over a quiet dinner at the snack bar on South Congress, my wife and I became those people, sucked into the narcotic glow of iPhones. Talking, not quite to each other. Smiling, not quite at each other. It lasted less than a minute, but I am still, days later, sad about it. This chapter is called Ars Poetica, Poems and Their Problems, and it begins with a quote from a Native American Oklahoman that I love very much as an actor and a poet and activist. And I love this quote. He says, "Just because people don't understand you, it doesn't mean you're a poet." So, this one is titled Editor. I submit to you this poem that might, I am afraid, make sense to some of your readers, and only because I thought they might enjoy the break, a snow day we could call it, from the rather demanding leaves of severe profundity you normally supply us, and that we do at least understand are for our own good. Voices. They have teeth, worn and polished from years of use, and a tongue just as lethal. But your critics would not love you if you changed. And, forgiveness. Forgiveness is like a freshly fallen coconut. There is milk, even meat inside, but getting to it is the damnedest thing. Antisthenes. This poem begins with a quote from Adam Zagajewski. We tried cynicism, some of us succeeded. Antisthenes. Cynics are not pessimists. They just prefer to shrewdly minimalize their optimism. And then I want to read, this one before I read one last here. This is a poem I'm reading for Vedran Smailovic, who is also known as the cellist of Sarajevo. There's quite a story behind this guy. It was during the war there in Sarajevo. There was a bread line across the street out the window of his apartment, and he saw a bomb go off in the middle of the bread line. I believe it killed 22 or some odd people across the street from him, and he had reached a breaking point mentally with the war. And he grabbed what I understand is a plastic chair from his room, put on his full symphony, the bow tie, the tux, the whole thing, grabbed his cello, and went down the steps and set his chair with bullets, with the war going on all around his head, and set the chair next to the bomb crater and began to play. This is called Mana for Vedran Smailovic. God is stingier than we give him credit for. He can't just throw the stuff around. We'd take it for granted. But on rare occasions, we hear it falling, as in the gut strings and bow of the cellist of Sarajevo, playing Albinoni's Adagio in G minor. In the rubble and burned-out ruin of the National Library, bullets and bombs the only choir singing in the broken air of the shattered stage behind him. As I was saying, this is a brand new one out called Less is More, More or Less, and I just happened to bring about 100 or 50 copies. I'm just throwing that out. Meet me at the back if you're interested. But I want to close with this poem. This was not what I was going to do. I had somebody earlier this morning ask me to end with this one, read this one again. It's the one I think I ended with last time. I'm not sure. It's called Between Two Artists, and it is my final word to critics. It's not really my final word. I have so many final words to critics. I keep writing them. No, I really mean it this time. Between Two Artists. Dear God, I have always admired your work, and were it not for that, I wouldn't bother you with this. But I must say that your installation piece at Point Lobos Nature Reserve above Big Sur simply goes too far. The Monterey pines are too tall. The cypresses are too fanned out in perfection from trunks tied in intricate knots that would take centuries to unravel. The cliffs appear superimposed for dramatic effect, with impossible jags giving way to fairy tale caves that burst forth gushes of blue water like a French soda topped with a spray of whipped cream. The crash of waves and explosions of foam are too much like a Disneyland ride. There are too many kinds of birds, too many varieties of plants, and too much color in both, I might add. In short, it lacks integrity. It does not speak to the truth of the way things are, and I do not think that viewers will trust or believe its authenticity.